Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see you. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Zoom room. Let me check that the chat box is working. You can let us know how you're doing. Let us know your names. Let us know a little bit about yourselves. It's great to see you. Fantastic. My name's Gareth Dyke. I'll be your host for this webinar this afternoon. So welcome to the event. Welcome, and you're all very welcome to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. Hello, hello, hello. Let's just give it a few moments for everybody to have the opportunity to join us in the Zoom room today. It's great to see so many people, and really hopefully we'll get some great content, some good attendance, and have an interactive, wonderful webinar experience. So thank you so much once again for being here. You should be able to chat in the webinar chat box. You should be able to put any questions that you have in the Q&A. My name's Gareth. This is a Bentham Science Publishers event brought to you courtesy of Bentham Science. And today we are going to be, in a moment when we get started, talking about writing your manuscript, the scientific story dealing with the manuscript writing and publishing process. Thank you for raising your hand. It's fantastic. I am on my own for this event today. So unfortunately, I am afraid that we'll have to do a Q&A at the end of our event this afternoon. I won't really be able to do too much with questions as we go through our content. I've only got 2 hands, but nevertheless, if you do have a question based on what we talk about in our event this afternoon, do put it please into either the Q&A or the chat box. Better if you can to put it into the Q&A. And of course, as usual with all of our events, with all of our webinars, with all of our Bentham Science online events that we do, we will be providing you with a recording of the event at the end. So don't worry if I speak too quickly or I say something that you don't necessarily understand. It's okay. You can listen back to the recording. You can use it to put your kids to sleep. You can use it to scare the animals. You can use it in the future as many times as you like. So I think that just a few minutes past the top of the hour, 3 minutes past 4 here in Budapest. I know it's the same time in Poland. We are ready to get going. Writing your manuscript, the art of scientific storytelling. Who am I? I'm Gareth. I worked for a number of years as an academic at a range of different universities, writing lots of papers, editing journals, working with researchers around the world. So I am going to be hopefully helping you with insights, with information, with tricks and tips on English academic writing as we go through our event this afternoon. I am English, as you may be able to hear from my accent, although I worked for a number of years in Ireland, so things got a bit messed up there with the way that I speak, but nevertheless, not to worry, it's okay. We are ready to get started. We are ready to start talking about writing and publishing your academic journey. Absolutely fantastic. We are Bentham Science Publishers. In case you don't remember from our previous event 1 month ago now, Bentham is a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher with more than 160 online and print journals, 166 to be precise, more than 1,300 online and print books, and a variety of information solutions for researchers across a range of academic and scientific disciplines. So don't forget to check us out. Do get in touch with us if you are looking for an absolutely fantastic outlet for your next academic paper. EurekaSelect.com is the site that you need to visit. EurekaSelect.com if you would like to learn more about all of the fantastic content that Bentham Science has to offer. Don't forget 166 journals, 40 of them fully open access, 126 of them hybrid, so you can publish in them without cost, or you can pay an extra fee for your article to be published, so-called gold open access. Bentham Science, do have a look at all of the fantastic content that we do have to offer you, and we are going to be talking in our event today around that academic publishing cycle. You may remember this from the last time that we met, when we talked about post-publication impact and managing the impact of your publications once they appear in those leading international journals. In this presentation, we will be talking about stage 5, the writing process, how to write, how to communicate, how to get your message across effectively in excellent, well-written, easy to understand English. That's the point of our webinar training today. And thank you once again for joining us, because of course, when you publish a paper, and there are many academic papers published all of the time, 30,000 in medical sciences published every month, about 2 million per year. How are you going to ensure that your research stands out, that people read your paper? Well, the first step of that process is, of course, journal selection, the first stage in the publishing process. And we always like to say you should select a journal before you begin the writing process. We'll come back to that in a moment. But of course, if you have a journal or journals, several journals in mind before you begin writing, that will help you, that will answer lots of the questions that you may have about how to write, what to put in the different sections, how much information to put, what information to put in the different bits of your paper. You can use articles close to your own subject area in your target journal to build a template for your paper. Of course, very important. So before you begin to write, do have a think about your target journal. And also, very interesting to also have a bit of a think about why you want to get your article published in the first place. Now, lots of academics at different career stages have different motivations, different reasons for wanting to get their papers published. They want to get papers published to get funding. They want to get papers published to get promoted or get tenure, to get their master's or PhD degree. And perhaps that's you. Perhaps you're in that position at the moment. Of course, many universities around the world have that requirement. They say, in order to get your PhD, you must have certain number of papers in Scopus Q1 journals. Your motivations, your reasons as a researcher for getting your work published in a journal, they're very different to the motivations of editors and peer reviewers. And of course, that's critical to keep in mind when you send your articles into those international academic journals, because editors, people like me working at journals, they sit and they look at incoming submissions and they think, does it fit with the journal scope? Does the article have a clear message? What we're going to talk about in this presentation this afternoon, making sure that you do have a clear message with your article, with the way that it's written. Is the research original? Is the research important? Is the research true? And is the research that you are presenting in the article that you're submitting to this journal relevant to our readers? These are the things that editors think about when they assess articles coming into their journals for potential peer review. You've got to sell yourself to get through what we call academic triage. You've got to make sure that your story, your article contains a great story that will be of interest to those editors at those journals. Don't forget that Nature and Science, those big high impact factor journals where we all want to publish our research, have high, huge, massive, ginormous rejection rates. 9 out of 10 papers that get sent to Nature and Science, of course, get rejected before peer review. So you need to do all that you can to make sure that your submission, your fantastic research, gets into that top 10% of articles that editors look at and think, I am going to send this out for peer review. I'm interested in this research. I am going to share it with the journal peer reviewers. So having said all of that, let's begin thinking about how to write your next paper. Of course, before starting to write, you've thought about a target journal. You've also thought about how you're going to sell the message of your research to that editor, to the person in the editorial office who's going to be assessing your work when it comes in as a submission. You've got those things in mind. What are you going to know about before you start to write your next paper? This is my grandmother, real photo. She is somebody that I always used to check my research with before sending it to a journal, because if you can't explain your research in simple and easy to understand terms to somebody who has no idea at all about what your research is all about, you haven't got a chance at high impact factor journals. Your readership's going to be general. You've got to explain how your research is interesting, why your research is interesting to general people. So think about your granny, think about a bus driver, think about explaining your research, understanding the message of your research before you make your next submission. Because of course, going back to what we talked about before, about editors, assessing papers that come into the editorial office and deciding, will they send them out for peer review? Of course, if an editor can't work out your take-home message, they're going to reject your paper without sending it out for peer review. You're going to get into that big percentage of papers that get rejected before peer review. And of course, editors as well will reject your paper if you haven't convinced them of your study's importance. Editors at journals, especially higher impact factor ones, they think if I am interested, my readers will be too. So keep that in mind before you begin to write your message. Number one thing to have in mind. And the second thing after your message is preparing to write. Thinking about the original nature of your results. The story, as we've already talked about, the take-home message. Is your work new and interesting? How does it relate to a currently hot topic? What's new and challenging? Do you provide a solution to a difficult problem? It really is all in the story. As you build your research, as you build your submission, get it ready to send to an international journal, try to write down the message of your research, what it is that you want readers to remember when they read your paper in 1 or 2 sentences. That's really going to help as well, by the way, for the title, for the abstract, for the top and bottom of the discussion. What is the take-home message of your research? Have that in mind before you begin. So thing number 1 to think about before you start to write, what's your message? What is it that you want people to remember when they read your paper? We've thought already about that. We've thought already about having a target journal. We've thought already about selling your work to a journal editor, but message. And secondly, audience, that target journal, selecting a target journal, very, very important. You always want to aim high, choosing appropriately, and then learning to sell and manage your article submission. Because as you get going, as you start to put your paper together, you've got your topic in mind. Of course you have. You've got your audience in mind. Of course you have. That's your target journal. You know the purpose of writing your paper, and you're ready to gather all of that supporting information. You're ready to go with the writing process. And we think about the structure of academic articles. The general structure of an academic article, of course, in an STEM discipline, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine, you've got your title, you've got your authors, you've got your abstract and your keywords, which perform in particular a very distinct function from the remainder of the paper, the main text, the so-called IMRAD academic article structure. Your title and your abstract, as well as your keywords, have to be easy for indexing and searching. They've got to be informative, they've got to be attractive, and they've got to be effective. They've got to get people wanting to read your article. I'm sure you've all seen hundreds of examples of papers and you've thought, why should I read that? It's not interesting. You've got to sell your work to your journal. So what we're going to do in this presentation, in a little bit, we're going to go through the different sections of an academic paper. We're going to talk about how you can apply some tips and tricks to getting those different sections written effectively. But don't forget about your title, your abstract, as distinct from the main body text of your article. Because, of course, in terms of writing and in terms of structure, readers need to know all the way through the work where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. It's a bit like writing or reading a detective story. I'm a huge fan of Agatha Christie. It's all about the plot. Writing an effective academic paper, no different from writing a movie or writing a detective story. There's got to be a story. Readers have to know where they are going, and where they've come from all the way through your paper. So having said that, and I hope that you're thinking, well, before I write my next academic paper, I'm going to follow Bentham science advice. I'm going to think about my message. I'm going to think about my audience, the target journal, Bentham science, and I'm going to think about the structure of my writing. So message, audience, and structure. If you forget everything else that we talk about in this presentation today, do remember those three things. And if you're falling asleep already, that's okay. Message, audience, and structure. Thinking about those items before you begin to write your next paper will put you in a very good position in order to put it together. So let's move on. Let's talk about some English tips and tricks for academic writing, because of course we all get letters like this all the time, don't we? Dear sir, dear madam, many thanks for asking in submission whether we'd like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but we're not willing to publish it. The good bits were not original, and the original bits were not good. We all get rejected all of the time, and it happens. Of course, one of the key skills to develop as an academic researcher is the ability to bounce back from rejection. Top issues, top problems that international journals have with our research: papers outside the scope, plagiarism, incorrect formatting, poor English writing, reviewer responses, and recycled submissions. The number one reason, unfortunately, and we're living in a fantastic time with all the AI tools, all of the opportunities for non-native speakers to get their work up to publishable standard in English language journals, is English language. So perhaps you're sitting there asking, why do my papers keep getting rejected? Well, potentially because of issues in the English. So I searched the internet, I scoured online resources to come up with these hilarious examples of how you can get your message buried if your English language communication skills in written form are not up to the mark. And it's very important, very, 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 very important that your academic research message is not buried in those pesky language issues, because then when the paper goes for review, it goes to an editor, the editor or the reviewer is going to think, I can't fully understand this work. I'm going to send it back to the authors with a rejection. And of course, English is the universal language of scientific academic communication. Academic papers, they need to be well written, often to a higher standard of English than we might find in other kinds of writing. But as I hope to show you in this presentation today, the writing process can be beneficial to our future scientific work as an intellectual activity in its own right. The question is, of course, how? Well, I have 3 examples of my own personal heroes when it comes to academic writing. Good old Winston Churchill, as JFK famously said, he was able to mobilize the English language and send it into battle. 2 journalists that I absolutely love as well. I learned a lot about writing from good old Hadley Freeman. The best way to write is exactly the way that you think. And my favorite writer of all time, sadly not with us anymore, so dyslexic that he didn't have the opportunity to write at all. He was just reading and writing and talking into a dictaphone, and then his language was transcribed out of a spoken form. So if you are able to communicate, if you are able to speak, think in English, think about your research in English, as we'll talk about in a moment. There are many, many, many ways that you can get that into an effective academic written format. But let's think, before we start talking about that, how do you feel about writing in English? How do you start? Do you carefully construct a plan beforehand, or do you just jump in without a plan? If English is not your native language, you need to be like Arnold, who also is not a native English speaker. He's an architect, a bricklayer. He's building a plan for his academic writing before he gets going. You need a plan, you need a structure, and we can learn a lot about how that can work from people who've come before us. You need a plan before you begin your academic writing. And we've talked about this a little bit already, those 3 things to know about before you start to write: message, audience, and structure. If you have those in mind, of course, with a target journal, that's your audience. You know your message, you know what's important from your piece of academic work, you know what you want to get across to your audience. The structure comes from your target journal. So people often ask us, of course, how can I write in English? Give me some tips. Well, as we've already mentioned, try to think in English and write as you think. If you're thinking about your research in a second language or a third language, and then you're translating it into a journal article, that may not be the most effective way to get your message across. Try to think about your research in English and try to do it little and often. Try to do it every day, a little bit, just 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If you translate, use a subject area specialist. And our top tip, find academic papers that you like and respect in your field, in your target journal, as we've already discussed, for style, for shape, for structure, and presentation. You can go a long way by finding a paper that's recently been published in your target journal, in the journal that you want to use for your next paper: message, audience, and structure. Don't forget, you can find a paper or several papers from your target journal and copy their style, copy their shape, copy their structure, and copy their presentation. Because in effective English academic writing, short sentences are used. No unnecessary words, familiar words, active voice rather than the passive voice, a clear style with good punctuation. Don't forget, don't ever forget that when you write and publish an academic paper in English, most of the people reading that paper, that's right, most of the people reading that paper will not be native speakers. Most of the users of your next research paper will themselves be non-native English speakers. So for these reasons, short sentences, no unnecessary words, familiar words, active voice, clear style, and good punctuation. So we're going to talk now about a little bit, some tips and tricks for those different sections of your next academic paper. We've got lots of other presentations just like this one. We'll be coming back, of course, later to talk more about English writing. So don't worry, or indeed, if you'd like us to do extra presentations, we have a whole series of Bentham online webinars that you can get access to, you can sign up for, you can join us for, and we do them once a month, usually on the last Thursday of every month. Do have a look at our website. You can Google Bentham Science Webinars. You'll get access to that landing page and you can sign up for our monthly events. In terms of article preparation, then, as we've mentioned before, the general structure of a full article, the title and abstract, very, very important as windows into the work, drawing people in, getting them interested in the study, getting them wanting to learn and read more. And then the main text, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion conclusions. We'll talk about each of these different sections in turn, beginning with your title. What should go into a great title? Well, in a title, you're going to have the fewest possible words in order to get your message across accurately and effectively. A good title should contain the fewest possible words that adequately describe the contents of your paper. Keep it short. Effective titles identify the main issue of the paper. They talk about the subject of the paper. They're accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete, and they don't contain infrequently used abbreviations. They attract people's attention. They allure people. They bring people in to the study. They get people wanting to read the paper. Your title should be concise and informative. The most important words related to the topic entice people without giving away the punchline, not over sensationalized. And of course, some journals also insist on study design in the title. So again, looking at your target journal, looking at your audience, deciding on where you're going to send your paper, and argue with people, argue with your co-authors, edit, work on that title, massage it, go through different versions, come up with a version that works best for all of your co-authors that fits with your target journal. And here's an example from my own work from back in 2017. It's an ecology journal. It's quite technical, but nevertheless, there are no hard to understand words in that title. So your title, very important, keep it short. By the way, a title less than 7 words, less than 7 words in length is often going to get more citations. Studies have shown that, especially in the medical sciences. What about your abstract? We know quite difficult to write an effective abstract. It's 200 words. It's 300 words. Depending upon your target journal, it's got to be honest and precise. It's got to stand alone. No technical jargon, short and specific, and citing no references, because of course the quality of your abstract, the quality of your next academic article abstract is going to inform, as we talked about earlier, your editor's decision as to whether or not to send your paper out for peer review. Many journals base their initial decisions on the abstract alone, and sadly, many authors write these in a rush, almost as an afterthought. It's got to be a concise, standalone piece of writing with a very clear message, accurately reflecting the full text of the paper. And you can do this quite easily, by the way, if you use the 4 questions written here at the bottom of this slide. You answer them in sequence, and then you delete the questions. So write down these questions. The next time you've got to write an academic abstract for a conference or for an academic paper, answer these questions and then delete the questions. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Why did you do the study? That's the introduction, right? What did you do? That's the methods. What did you find? Those are the results. And what did you conclude? Put those in, write those down, answer those in sequence with information from your own study. You will have a easy to follow structured abstract ready to go. Write a structured abstract. Give it a go. This technique can help you to organize your ideas. Give it a try. Many journals, by the way, already are asking for a structured abstract depending upon your particular subject area, chemistry, medical science, many biological science journals ask for a structured abstract anyway. And that's what you should be writing, especially as a young researcher, perhaps a non-native speaker, in order to get your ideas, in order to get the information into your writing in sequence. The background, the methodology, and the conclusions and significance are how you get your abstract ready to go and put together. So when you go to a highly cited, useful paper in your field that you've read, you've looked at a number of different times, you should be able to go with a little colored pencil into that article and mark off the different sections in sequence. You should see the answers to my 4 little questions in sequence in a well-written abstract. Here, for example, a summary, the introduction, the methods, the results, the discussion and conclusions in that sequence in your abstract. Answer those 4 questions. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Because of course, as we've talked about already several times in this presentation this afternoon, structure is the most crucial element of successful academic article writing. What do you need to do before you start to write? Think about your message. Think about your audience, your target journal, and think about the structure of your article. Think about the structure of your writing. As we already discussed, readers, the users of academic content, the users of academic papers, need to know where they've come from. They need to know where they are now, and they need to know where they're going. A plot is needed. A paper is just like a story. If you have fallen asleep, if you forget everything in this presentation today, do think, please remember what to do before you start to write your message, your audience, and your structure. So grabbing the reader in the introduction, getting them interested in the study is of critical importance. So in your article introduction, you're going to have 3 sections where you initially grab them, get them interested, tell them what your study is about, keeping it short, 2 or 3 paragraphs if possible, avoiding a literature review, setting the scene, giving your reader the state of the art in the introduction, rather than describing everything that's known about the topic. A well-structured and well-written academic article introduction contains a little bit about the question that the paper seeks to address. It then gives the reader what we call the state of the art, an up-to-date summary of all of the literature that's currently known in that area by using review papers. And then you bridge from your introduction into the methods by telling the reader what's going to come next, what will happen next. An opening sentence that takes your readers straight to the issue that your paper addresses. A brief summary of the controversies and the best evidence that summarizes those controversies, keeping within the rules of good writing, using active voice. And I see a question already in the Q&A. Should we use the active rather than the passive voice? Yes. About 70 to 80% of most academic papers published these days in the literature are using about 70 to 80% of their text in the active voice. It's shorter. It's easier to understand. It gets the message across much more effectively to readers. Talking about the most important details and ending your introduction with a crisp and clear research sentence that summarizes what the paper is going to do. 3 paragraphs. State the question. What's the issue? The state of the art in the second section of your introduction, and then finish with a short phrase. Here we show. In the active voice, you take the reader into the methods. You bridge between the introduction and the methods. So start off by stating the question. This study aims to show X, Y, and Z. Then give a summary of the best evidence, the state of the art, as we like to say from grant writing technique, and then give your readers at the end a bridge between the introduction and what comes next, which is the methods. And by the way, if you need more information about all of this kind of stuff, more information about article writing, we have all of that content. We will be very happy. We'd be delighted to come back and talk more in more detail. Aiming are examples at specific papers in your particular subject area. Bridge your introduction into the methods, which, by the way, is the best bit of academic paper writing. Here you've got a sequence of events. What happened first? What you did second? What you did third? You write down what you did in the study in sequence in your methods, all of the methodological details necessary for someone else to duplicate the work. It's a narrative of steps that you took in your experience. Not a list of instructions like you might find in a cookbook, but a sequence, a timeline, a list of instructions, and very important to put enough information into this section so that somebody else can repeat the work in the future. Some of it might go into a supplement, but you've got to put enough information in here for somebody else to be able to repeat your study, because it's extremely common for editors to reject papers because authors used the wrong methods to answer a question. So give enough detail so a qualified reader can repeat the work. If your method section is thin on details, editors are going to worry that you're hiding something. And be careful with your statistical analyses. Talk to us beforehand if you need help with that. Make sure that everything in the methods gives the readers enough information for them to repeat your study. Editors and peer reviewers very often reject papers because of perceived issues in the method section. It's a timeline, a sequence of events, data collection before data interpretation here, and analysis. Data collection, data analysis. Of course, I misspoke. Interpretation comes a little bit later in the discussion section, but data collection, data analysis in a timeline sequence of events. And then, of course, in your results section, you use your figures that you make from your study at the beginning of the writing process, as we talked about in our previous event, to build out your results. You talk about the results, but do not interpret their meaning. As with the method section, the trick to writing a good results section is knowing what to include. And you'll find that very often method sections and results sections in academic papers follow the same overall basic timeline structure. So information in the methods is presented one after another in terms of what was done in the study, first, second, and third, and then the results from those different sections of the methods are presented in sequence in the results. So you order your results section around primary and secondary outcomes in the same order as listed in the method section, stating clearly and simply what you found using words and numbers, and basing your results section around figures and tables. Of course, these are the bits of academic writing that we usually do first. Usually when we finish a study, we make figures, we make tables. Those form the basis of your results section. And for that reason, the results section of an academic paper is usually the part that's written first. The results, facts, and nothing but the facts. And it follows often the same structure as already encountered for the reader in the methods section. And that's something that we see a lot in academic articles, methods and results following the same overall structure. So, introduction, methods, results, and then in the discussion, you interpret what you have found. You talk about what your results mean, why they differ from what previous workers have found. Interpret in light of other published results. Begin your discussion section with a sentence that answers the question that your paper seeks to address. Give your readers the answer at the beginning of your discussion. Tell them what the outcome of the study is at the very beginning. Limit your data to what you can actually support and suggest future directions for research, new methods, explanations. Go further in your study. Put new directions in so that other people have to cite you, so that other people have to use and cite your work in their later studies. We don't want to see an expansive essay that goes all over the place, extrapolating wildly from what was found. Start your discussion, as I just mentioned, with a single sentence that states your main findings, discussing both the strengths and the weaknesses of your study, reporting negative results, talking about things that your study couldn't do. That strengthens your work when it's time for peer review. Of course, relate your study to what's already been found. Talk about how your results fit with what's already known. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your work compared to previous studies? Why does your paper offer a different conclusion? But don't put too much egg in the pudding, as we say in English. Don't overstate the importance of your findings. Readers need to come to their own conclusions. What did your research not address? And please, 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 do not finish your paper with a sentence, "More research will be required before we can fully understand the outcome of this study." It's a cliche, of course. More research will be needed. Editors like to delete those sentences. It's a very weak way to finish a study. Of course, more research is needed. You don't need to say it. Do not finish your paper in that style. Finish your discussion. Finish your conclusions in the same way as if you were running a race. Get to the finish line strong. Your main, most significant conclusion comes at the end of the study. And again, be structured. Copy, follow those target journal examples that you found at the beginning of the writing process. How you put your discussion section together, and keeping in mind this IMRAD, academic article structure, at all times. The title and abstract perform a different function to the rest of the paper. Don't forget that often your readers will only engage with the title and the abstract of your study. The rest of the article, for general, specific, more interested readers, keep it careful, keep it specific, keep following the instructions that we present in this and other webinars. Of course, we're always very, very happy to come back and talk about any of this content in more detail. So just get in touch with the team at Bentham Science. You will get your work published if you pick an important research question. Of course, that's up to you. You will get your work published if you use the right method to address your question. Again, that's up to you. You've got to write a short, clear, easy to understand account of your study that follows a tight structure and uses effective writing to convey your message clearly. And so I hope at least a little bit in this presentation I've been able to help you how that works, how you can do that, how you can bridge between your fantastic research results. Of course, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in if you weren't doing fantastic research. How to get that published, though, is a different matter. And of course, science has become more cross-disciplinary over the years, but often peer reviewers are not. They're focused on the issues. They're focused on the problems with your paper. They want to pick holes. They want to shoot your work down. So focus carefully on your methods section in particular, because as our friend good old Winston Churchill was famous for saying, success consists of going from failure to failure without losing any of your enthusiasm. And as academics, that's really, really important. We get rejected more often than almost any other kind of person in the working world. Perhaps only salespeople who sell things for a living get rejected more than academics. But how you bounce back, how you recover, how you take your work, take the comments that you get in peer review, send your paper to the next journal. Building on your work is going to define your career. Don't forget that we are Bentham Science. We are a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher with more than 160 online and print journals, 166 to be precise. member of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. Do get in touch with our team if you'd like to learn more information about what we have available and how we can help your researchers. EurekaSelect.com is the website that you need if you want to learn more about Bentham science. And by the way, we are proud to say that we have the most robust peer review process to be found anywhere in the publishing industry. Editors are not involved in the selection of peer reviewers. Every paper is double-blind peer reviewed, so the reviewers don't know who the authors are and vice versa. Very rigorous, very robust. It's one of the best places in the industry for your work to get published. So, a little bit more information about how this works. Bentham peer reviewers ranked within a pool of more than 85,000 active researchers. Double-blind peer review carried out by researchers who've been vetted based on their background. No other publisher does this. And by design, our editors are not involved in peer reviewer selection, which dramatically removes the risk of research misconduct and almost all of those biases. Our editors-in-chief perform 3 quality checks that you can see here on the slide in front of you. And I, at that point, will say thank you for your attention. My name's Gareth. Do follow Bentham Science on a variety of our social media channels. And with that, if there are any questions or any comments, do put them into either the Q&A or the chat box. I saw Jakob's question. Should we avoid passive voice or not? Well, yes, as much as possible, you should avoid use of the passive voice if you can. That would be absolutely fantastic. That's a better way to put your papers together. I wonder if anyone else has any questions. Thank you, Patrick. I have a question about the discussion section. What's the difference between describing how our results fit with previous results and interpreting them? Start off by giving your readers the answer to the question, Patrick. Okay, so start off by talking about what the answer is, what your results show, and then interpret your results, and then discuss how your results are different to what's been talked about before in the literature. A well-written discussion section has a pyramid shape. Maybe you've seen those shapes in other discussions of academic article writing, but in a well-written discussion, you start specific, your results, your outcomes, then you discuss those outcomes and you build out to general, more kind of overarching discussions of where your results fit in the context of other studies. Malgazata, excuse my pronunciation, is asking, can we have our presentation available somewhere? Of course, everybody will get access to a recording of this presentation. Absolutely no problem. Yes, Kinga, the recording will be available to everybody. Isn't there a risk, says Hilal, that short sentences will appear a bit childish? No, not at all. No, it's much better to have short sentences, verbs, close as possible to nouns and adjectives. Keep the sentences as short as possible, rather than making them complicated and hard to understand. So no, if you're writing an academic paper and you want people to understand it, Hilal, keep the sentences as short as possible. You're aiming for 10 to 15 words. Yun is asking, where exactly can we see the information on the monthly events? Well, on the Bentham Science website, or if you Google Bentham Science webinars, you'll find a landing page that gives you all of that information. We'll certainly put that into our follow-up information from this presentation as well. And you can join us every month, but we still have 2 more events in this series for your university as well. So don't worry, you'll see us again. It's not the last time. Lots of things still to talk about. Maria is asking, when we did the model, but the results were not so fascinating, should we still try to publish it as it's still new data? Yes. Make a preprint, Maria. Put the work out as a preprint. Put it onto one of the big preprint servers or one of the preprint servers specific to your field. Share the information with other colleagues in your subject area. As a student, I do not have access to special survey tools yet. Is it worth to use Google Forms? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But do talk to your advisors, do talk to your university, make sure that you get access to all of the tools and online equipment that you need to make sure that your research is able to get ahead. But of course, there's nothing wrong with surveying attendees if you're doing a qualitative survey or indeed a quantitative survey using Google Forms. If we should avoid repeating info in figures and text in results, won't it be an accessibility issue? No, Jakob, you put information into figure captions as well. So your figure captions and figures as single units will stand alone from the main body text of your paper. But that's a great question. We have other presentations. I'll share them with you at the end so that you can have access to those in order that you can put that information more effectively into your papers. I'm just checking the chat box again. What do I think about Writeful? Wow. I think Writeful and other apps for academic editing are fantastic, but be careful if you're using them for academic writing to put your ideas into practice. Also, we have presentations. We have other information about the use of AI tools. So do get in touch with that. We'll talk about that. Should we refer in the text to all of the figures? You have to. Yes, that's something that academic editors will check when they go through your paper. So if there's a figure included in your paper that's not been cited in the text, that can be an issue. Is the sentence length similar in humanities and sciences? Yes, this is about English language communication, Hilal. So you need to make sure that people reading your papers can get across, can understand your message. Thank you, everybody, for all of the wonderful comments. I'm very grateful for all of the excellent feedback, for all of the comments and questions. Let me just stop sharing my screen. We will, of course, give everybody access to this presentation at the end of the event when we send you a follow-up email in the next few days. Thank you all for your attention. Do keep in touch. I'm Gareth Dyke. You can find me easily on LinkedIn. This has been a presentation brought to you today by Bentham Science Publishers. And so with that, I will say thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you in our next event for your university or indeed in one of our monthly webinar events. Thank you and have a good evening.